Well, I think we got off to an excellent first start with the first panel. I thank you very much to the three speakers and to Rich, the chair, for really giving us a strong foundation in women's health and population reproductive health situation. Learned a lot, daunting challenges, from one set of daunting challenges to another. On our second panel, we've entitled it Natural Resources, Demand and Deregulation. We're very fortunate that His Excellency Ambassador Mohammed Al-Eryani has joined us. He's the Yemeni ambassador to Berlin, to Germany, and he has kindly joined us to talk about Yemen's freshwater resource challenges. Obviously, as we heard from Gary's presentation, an area of significant challenge. And we thank him very much for making the trip and joining us in today's discussion. Second, Daniel Egel, as Rich said, is somebody who was very helpful to us in conceiving how to tackle these challenges in a meeting and in a discussion, and was very generous with his insights and his network and connections in helping us learn about these issues as we prepared this session. Daniel is going to talk about livelihoods in rural Yemen before the crisis. He's associate economist at RAND, new to Washington, not at all new to Yemen, has spent a lot of time working in a variety of rural development projects in Yemen, as well as studying from academics, so both practitioner and academic perspective on this, and we appreciate his sharing his insights with us as well. So I think we'll just jump right into it and turn the floor over to the ambassador for a discussion of water.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I would like to start by thanking the center for inviting me to this important workshop. And I'm really happy to be with such distinguished group of scholars and professionals interested in Yemen and its development. For those of you who wonder what does, or let me say, what the hell is does an ambassador in Germany has to do with water? By profession, I am a water engineer. I have a PhD because also my bio was missed from the bio summaries. And so I should introduce myself. I have a master's degree from Tucson, Arizona in '79 in hydrogeology, a PhD from Utah State University in '84 in water resources engineering. I worked for about 15 years in the College of Engineering in Sana'a University. Last post I was there, the dean. I founded the College of Engineering. I spent 4 years with the UN in Beirut, with the UN ESCWA, Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, heading the water team there. And then I was called back to Yemen to found the Ministry of Water and Environment. Spent 3 years there, 2003 until 2006. And then in 2007, I was appointed as ambassador in Berlin. And that's how I got to talk about water and water issues in Yemen. I want to start my presentation. Let me see if I can find it. I think it's this one. No, it's not mine. Ah, okay. Oh my goodness. Well, if you notice here, I didn't use the word challenges because that's the title the center gave to the water problem. I think it's already a crisis. So, and I have used, I thought we should talk a little bit about the causes and about designing the solution. I think we have to design a solution, and I will let you know why a solution has to be designed It's not really an easy problem. And then also let me just go back to the title of this workshop, at least the former title, which was Yemen's Development, Present and Future. I think water has to do a lot with the present and with the future of Yemen, and that's why I think this population workshop, or mainly focused on population, also has to look at water specifically as a key natural resource that feeds into the problem of population growth. Let me let you go over the outline. We'll just have a quick overview, then the highlights of the crisis, the causes, synthesis, the impact and ramifications, and then maybe the solution, concluding remarks. I think it might take me maybe 20-25 minutes to go over it, but I'll skip things if needed. This is, the country is about 550,000 square kilometer. It has diverse physical and topographic features, from mountain chains to desert areas, and climates that vary from desert climate to temperate climate, more or less. Rainfalls from less than or around 50 to more than 1,800 millimeters. Historically, the country has relied on terraces as the food production engineering for an arid country like Yemen. And for many years, people really relied on the sorghum, the maize, and these kinds of cereals that were really the main kind of wheat was really a very rare commodity that you can only have in feasts and special occasions, and yet in the country until 1960 or so was completely self-dependent in food production. As you see, these terraces are really a forgotten monument of Yemen, because these mountains are all terraced. For those of you who have been in Yemen, I think, and to appreciate the amount of work in these terraces, they are built over hundreds of years. They start at the bottom of a mountain, they divert the runoff from the mountainside into the wall that they build at the bottom, and then they work their way up, building another wall, and then waiting for the next rainy season to drift the soil down, and so on and so forth. Takes years and years really to build them, and then you have to maintain them, because if they breach, then you lose all the soil, and it's really a monumental kind of work. It's not soil brought from somewhere and dumped there like in other regions, in Indonesia or maybe in other countries where terraces are built artificially. This is really the food basket for Yemen, and it is unfortunately threatened by negligence and etc. and so on and so forth. This is an ISO height of the country, which shows you the distribution of rainfall. You can see the density of rainfall to the west, and it ranges from 50 millimeters up in the northeastern side to the 800 peak in the southwest. And and the reason I bring this is to show you how the population distribution is, because it matches with the population distribution. That's where people have concentrated, where the rainfall is. So this is now we go to the water crisis. What kind of crisis we have? We have a severe imbalance between annually renewable water resources and annual water use. Essentially a water deficit, which continues to grow annually and is met by groundwater overexploitation. So, and where more than 90% is used for irrigation. To go back on the historical water use in Yemen, groundwater was only occasionally used because, you know, drilling rigs and pumps and these kind of technology were not available in the country that extensively until the 70s. And you know, the first drilling rig was introduced by USAID, Project 025. I worked in that project in 78, I think, 77, 78. And it wasn't until that late that drilling rigs came into the country extensively. Now we have, I think, more than 1,000 drilling rig. You know, they're, you know, roaming in the country all over the place, drilling and exploiting groundwater and so on and so forth. So, and coupled with this deficit, there is a limited success in controlling and managing this imbalance, which is also aggravated by other factors. Yemen is one of the most water-stressed countries in the world. This is a fact which we heard also this morning. Annual per capita is 120 cubic meters of the renewable water resources. And you can compare this with about 1,000 for the MENA region, about more than 7,000 globally, and a requirement of 1,000 cubic meters per year for domestic and agriculture use and food production, let me say. This is you know, a calculated amount that you need as a minimum per year. So we are only 2% of the almost 1% of the MENA region, almost 1%, or 10%, yeah, and about 2% of the 6% of the global average, and you know, and that's really very serious shortage. There is a growing demand because of population growth and because of irrigation growth. Irrigation has grown from about 40,000 hectares in the 1970s to about 400,000 hectares now, thanks to the cat growing. You know, this plant, which you know, I'm sure most of you know what I'm talking about here. There is failure to develop alternative economic activities, and this is really a key issue here, that the economy has not really diversified enough to provide the population with other things to do and to earn their livings other than, you know, farming, drilling a well and growing something or selling water or whatever, you know. So the diversification of the economy has not really. And I think that the groundwater exploitation is just you know, a payoff for the failure of the development process. You know, that people really resorted to exploiting the water because they didn't find any other opportunities in front of them to see, you know, to engage in as economic activities. It is you know, like that. Then also you have the adverse macroeconomic policies, like many incentives for wastage of water and disincentives for conservation of water. There is also the unregulated access to drilling and pumping technologies, institutional and legislative vacuum. You know, when these technologies were introduced, there wasn't really much legislation to control their use early enough, you know, when they were introduced. So when we are trying to do it now, people are, you know, are more resistant to it, and it's more difficult. There is poor governance, institutional and legislative weaknesses, and there is the common pool dilemma, you know, where, you know, people are competing to pump out the last cubic meter of water before their neighbor really takes it out, and that's because of the lack of regulation here. Climate change also adds to this problem, more frequency of and intensity of extreme events like droughts and floods, and with huge economic and social environmental costs impacting development. There is more variability of crop yields also because of climate change, and this is already felt in the frequency of droughts in the country, and floods also. Irrigation efficiency is only 20 to 40%, still, very inefficient. Water quality degradation, to add to this water scarcity, some of the water is also lost to pollution. Inadequate investment in the sector, in water-saving technologies, in desalination, in mobilization, awareness, etc. So what we have here is the impacts and ramifications. We have rapidly depleting exhausted aquifers. In Sana'a, the water levels are dropping by an average of 6 meters per year. Many groundwater basins are already exhausted, and this is already, we have cases where people have deserted their and have lost their farms. They have, there are already cases for that. There is chronic water shortages in most major cities, despite the fact that only 56% of the urban population have access to networked water, and 45% in the rural areas. Loss of livelihoods and investments in rural areas. Depleting aquifers seriously threaten the livelihood, income, food, shelter, and investment of large numbers of people. And then severe reduction of agriculture output. A recent study by the World Bank estimates that by the year 2025, groundwater reserves are likely to be mostly depleted, and the agriculture output will go down by 40%, which is another disaster, forecast. Depletion adds to unemployment, it adds to poverty, and you can see how water is really the driver for many economic livelihoods and the lives of people, because the country is mostly 55% of the workforce is engaged in agriculture, in farming, and in marketing of products, etc. So if you lose this economic activity, then unemployment is a victim, and poverty problems, etc., and higher cost of water. It triggers more internal migration, rural, urban, rural, creates more competition among farmers, induces more conflicts and violence. So it's really a very domino effect of kind of a crisis that really invites many other consequences and ramifications that really are overwhelming. They're really overwhelming. And then add to this indirect impacts on household budget, on health, household budget, on health, on girl education even, on peace and security in general. And there are already mounting day-to-day challenges which we could see, water managers in various parts of the country, they can see on daily basis these kinds of challenges faced. The solution, there can be no one single action to take that would solve the crisis. It's really many, many things that have to be done in various areas, in various directions, and together they can make a viable solution that can really avert a catastrophe, let me say. So nobody, sometimes we will talk about desalination, but this is not the, it is only to the uneducated that you can talk about desalination as a solution, because desalination might be a solution for coastal areas, coastal cities, and it can never be a solution for irrigation. It can, so it's part of a solution, and so on and so forth. There are things that need to be done here and there as a mixture of actions. There is a key issue here that in terms of agriculture, farmers control the water. It's not the government that controls the water. This is the fact of this matter. The government has no control over water. So we have to work with the farmers. Any solutions have to be worked out with the farmers. And that brings me to to something that also reflects on the previous workshop in terms of first of all, the rural population, any interventions in water or regarding population. Looking at the rural communities, rural population, we still have about 70%. Yemen has still 70% rural population and 30 urban. So this is really, that tells you a lot about where you should focus. Focusing in the rural areas. That's number one. Number two, and this also relates to the population issue, you have to recognize the regional differences. In the previous workshop, my cousin here, she talked about Amran, and there are difficulties, of course, in Amran. I think Amran is one of the most difficult areas in the country to work in, to start with. There are areas where probably some of the policies and interventions could have been more successful, more responsive, received with more response from the population in other parts of the country. If you look to the Tehama maybe, or you look in Eb, in Taz maybe, and it's less difficult. And also for water, the water difficulty, we talk about the country as a whole, but there are areas that are more hit by the depletion of the aquifers than others, and response will be different from the farmers when you try to work with them. Number three, I think there is a third issue here, which I would reflect from my past experience, is projects have to go outside Sana'a. Everybody is sitting in Sana'a, working from Sana'a, out of Sana'a, and then back home, to Sana'a, even if they work in a nearby governorate. I know the situation, maybe these days they do not permit or whatever, but development is really, is a national challenge, and projects have to be designed for other parts of the country. They have to work in all over the country. And donors have really to start, designing projects that go to other areas, outside Sana'a, away from Sana'a, away from the capital, to areas where people need to feel more and more the development efforts that are being given there. Of course, the thrust of the solution is change supply to demand led, waste and efficiency to conservation, top down to bottom. These are really just directions for what kind of change is needed there. And then I wanted just to pick two directions. One is the supply-oriented measures. There is huge reserve of fossil groundwater in the east, and that can be part of the solution. And population redistribution policies to move the population from water-scarce areas to the coastal areas where you can do desalination, to these areas where there is good fertile land in the east and there is huge reserves of groundwater discovered by the oil exploration processes, and so on and so forth. So rainfall harvesting has to be revived as a sustainable kind of approach, recycling and reuse. Of course, then demand-oriented measures, more efficient use of groundwater, more investment, more diversification of the economy, community engagement, removal of the disincentives for conservation, and so on and so forth. These are all parts of a solution that what I meant by a mixture of measures and steps and things that have to be addressed to really tackle this difficult problem. Concluding remarks, I think the country's development failures have been and remain partly and temporarily covered up by widespread mining of its precious groundwater. This is really the core of this problem. The development work in Yemen has failed to diversify, and the groundwater mining is the cover-up for this. People could still find livelihoods in groundwater mining, and this is really. I'm sorry about this. This cannot continue for long. Already some rural economies are collapsing. You know, I'm just giving some examples here. Hayman, Taiz, Mawiya, Bani Khawlan, Saada, and so on and so forth, posing serious threat to social peace and security. You know, it's already examples. We have basins that have been dried up and population that have suffered, and they have moved to urban areas. They have lost their investments. They are really, because of the competition for water, they have drained their water resources. They're out of water. Nevertheless, more than 55% population continue to depend on that groundwater, and scarcity continues to threaten Yemen's stability and development. The battle to strike a sustainable balance between population growth and sustainable water supplies has been lost many years ago. We have lost that battle, but maybe we can still win the war if we can, undertake some of these, and some of these measures. Diversification of the economy, again, people in the rural areas have to find other means of living, other than, like cattle growing, like other livelihoods. And there is already some projects in that direction, smaller. CAT is a real challenge, but it cannot be addressed. It has to be, like that. It has to be in parallel with the conducive macroeconomic policies. Solutions should come as piecemeal and in the form of many actions. As I said, water and food stresses lead to more poverty and more radicalization. But deteriorating security also limits the economic opportunities. Here, there is a reciprocal kind of relationship, between peace and security and water and food stresses. They feed into each other. You have to really realize that relationship and understand it properly. NOSEP is our flagship for sector reform, which I, as Minister of Water, this was our roadmap for sector reform. It was praised by donors and it is in the region. It is a well-known exercise that we've done, and what makes it unique is that it has identified projects to undertake and estimated budgets needed and finances needed to implement it. It wasn't just a strategy; it's a strategy with cost attached to it, and it was possible with this document to really make significant increases in the allocations to the sector, in the contributions by donors, and in the improvement of water services and water control. And it continues. It has been updated. This was for 2005, 2009, 2008. There was an appraisal, a joint appraisal by the government and the donors, and lessons learned from the first phase were also undertaken into the next document for the next 5 years. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. I think we'll turn it over to Daniel, and then we'll have our discussion all together at the end.
You want your papers?
Which will,
So I'm going to, sorry, I'm talking in the resource panel, but I'm going to talk about the resource that I think is most important for rural Yemen, which are the people. And hopefully it'll connect back to all the different topics that are for this panel. It's not about water or really about land. It's about all these things together. So the goals laid out. I'm still a little bit of an academic, so everything's structured in that way. So I want to talk about economic dynamics, key resource challenges, and then social structure and dynamics in rural Yemen. The focus here is really on rural Yemen because that's where the resources are. And I think it's also a part of the country we know very little about. So what this discussion does is it draws on data that was collected before the crisis. So this is 2009 to 2010. This is a sort of compendium of a couple unreleased papers that are through the Social Fund for Development. At some point they'll become available, but focus on different kinds of rural challenges, the challenges that people are facing in rural Yemen. Really from sort of, this is, the way I like to think about this is understanding resources from the ground up or from the bottom up. While thinking maybe about water is maybe the other direction. And so since I think this is a policy audience, there's two questions I'm going to try to answer. What are the key development challenges that these people in rural Yemen face? And what role can the international development community play? Okay. Hopefully I can get this to advance. Oh no. Okay, so here are the key questions that I think about when I think about Yemen, when I read about what the international community is doing, and when I talk to policymakers, is that number one is that there's this huge focus on welfare programs. A lot of talk about food security and related concepts. Is that something that the international community should focus on? That's one of the things I'll talk about to some degree. So when we actually talk about development programs in Yemen, there's a big focus on agricultural development programs. And as Jeff said, I've been involved in a couple of these. They've been focused on crop development, animal development, and terrace rehabilitation, things along these lines. Are these appropriate? Is this really correct given the context? Or are these being driven by the foreign donors that go in with their specific goal? Another one that's this is sort of a personal interest is, I just think that the focus on COD is maybe a little bit too extreme. Talk about that a little bit. What is the implications of COD for individual people? And then this fourth one is hopefully related to what people talked about this morning, is that 70% of the population, yes, lives in rural Yemen. Even higher percentage of the women live in rural Yemen. And there's a lot of talk about very interesting programs, but how is it that the foreign development actors are actually going to reach these rural Yemen? And as I'll show you, it's actually pretty difficult. One of the things that one of the surveys we conducted had a nice module for rural women about their access to health services and things like that. And I'll show you a little bit of the difficulties that they face in accessing services. And then we can think about if foreign development actors are going to design programs, how are they going to do it given these constraints? And then this fifth one is related to this was my dissertation, is how do social programs interact with development? There's examples where, we know lots of examples of tribes and things, sort of part of a patronage system, and maybe that affects the development process. But in other cases, we know development programs have not taken social structures into consideration, and development programs have caused wars. And there's a bunch of water programs that are good examples of this, where sort of good policies come in, are not cognizant of local social structures, and have really disastrous consequences. Okay, so this is going to be a bit schizophrenic, and I apologize, but I think that the kind of data that we have that I put together with the Social Fund sheds light on a variety of different issues, from economics to resources to some gender equity, and then political and social structures. So it's a little bit of sort of a review, and if it's a little schizophrenic, I apologize. So economics and poverty. So one of the things I think that we often forget about rural Yemen, and so what's on this slide is that wages by far are the most important source of income for rural peoples. We know this in almost every developing country, and it's certainly the case in Yemen. So what I'm showing here is for rain-fed villages. So these are about 75% of the villages. These are the villages that rely predominantly on rainfall for agriculture, and then other rural villages. So you can see, so this third bar in this left chart is the percent, well, it's share, but it's the percent of income that's coming from wages among rain-fed villages. By far, over 50% of the income is from wage labor. Some of it's within the village, people working on other people's farms, but a lot of it's people migrating to urban areas, migrating to the provincial capital, to the district capital for wages. So I think this is very important. And the second one, again, here is remittances. So this is both international and internal remittances. So those two things are accounting for 70% of the total income of these families and rural Yemen. And I think that that's something to think about when we think about programs, is that most of our programs are focused on those two first bars, which are crops and animals. Okay, so this is just sort of giving you a little bit more of an idea of what the dynamics of rural employment looks like. Is that, I mean, the short story is that unemployment is very high. Among adult males, so these are 30 plus. This is sort of tying into some of this, when we think about the youth a little bit. The unemployment rate's about 25%, underemployment is about 35%. So there's about 60% of adult males and young males that are not fully employed. So this is just giving a distribution of the days worked. You can see for the men, about 40% are fully employed. So this is sort of, when we think about development programs, we might want to think more about how do we get these rural men to work, as opposed to, should we give them another cow? Should we give them another sheep? I don't want to be critical of these programs because I've participated in them, and they are certainly beneficial, but are they really development programs, or are they just welfare programs? So just to sort of complete the description of the employment situation, is that one thing, again, sort of one part of this that makes things very complicated is that rural wages are very high. Relative to other developing countries, is that the average daily wage of a rural worker in Yemen is about 1,500 Yemeni rial, which it used to be $7.50. Actually, I don't know what the exchange rate now. It's probably about $2.50, I think, but I actually don't know. So, I mean, that certainly creates a lot of problems in some sense. So it's good that wages are high, but it creates a sort of stickiness in terms of interacting with these rural areas. I mean, it's something, again, to keep in mind when we want to do rural development programs. And that people get other kinds of income as well. So I start off, I think my first question was, do we care a little bit too much about social welfare programs? There was a lot of discussion about food insecurity, especially in the wake of the 2008 food crisis. There was a variety of different programs. We need to spend money, we need to spend money. Most of the programs didn't really actually access a lot of these areas. And one thing that's really interesting is that the data I have, we can compare before the crisis and after the crisis. 2006, 2009, effectively there's no change in the number of people who are experiencing food insecurity. And why is that? I mean, so it's still 1/3 of the population are facing caloric problems where they're not getting enough caloric intake for their families. But the reason it doesn't change is because social structures still function in Yemen. So people don't starve when they run out of food. They go to their neighbor and they borrow, or they go to the store and they borrow. And this is the story. So you look at, so this graph at the bottom here is how people deal with the food crisis. They deal with the caloric shortage. So what do? Over 80% of them just borrow either money or they borrow food from their neighbors to survive. And there is some reduction in food. But if you look at most of what people talk about is that fourth bar. So the color's a little bit brighter on the screen. But the fourth bar is children and adults skipping meal. It's about 3%. So in about 3% of the cases, you actually have children facing malnutrition because of the food crisis. And again, it's sort of, so the communities are functioning. These communities are providing for their citizens, their neighbors, their brothers, their sisters, their cousins. So what is the role of the international community here? I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't interact with them, but we need to think about these kinds of things when we design our policies. Okay, so this is, nutritional insecurity, of course, is much more severe. And other people have pointed out that the vast majority of children suffer from micronutrient, that should be deficiencies, not efficiencies. But, sorry. You can see this. So the left panel here just gives you mean consumption of different kinds of important nutrients, different very protein-rich and nutrient-rich foods, very infrequently. So this is the number of times, so that first bar is an example, is the number of times the red meat is consumed per month. On average, it's 1. If you combine red meat, chicken, and fish, if you combine them across all households, it's about 4. So people are eating protein-rich stuff about once a week. Okay, so that was food insecurity. So what is one of the side effects of food insecurity and all this borrowing is that most households have a lot of debt. And this is one of the things, again, one of the aspects of rural Yemen that I don't think is discussed all that much, is most households face a lot of debt. And so if you look at this bar chart here, this is the debt as a percentage of annual earned income. So about 10% of the population have 200% of their income is held in debt. So this is the equivalent of a staffer in D.C. who makes $30,000 having a $60,000 debt and trying to service that. And that's 10% of the population here. So this is very, very significant. Not really any way to get out of this. This is a real poverty trap. So the side effect of this, and this is when we get back into sort of different kinds of asset transfer programs, giving them goats and sheep, is about 20% of the households that we interviewed within the last couple of months had sold some sort of productive asset, animal, land, or something like that to help pay off their debt. So this I think is really a very significant problem going forward, is that when we think about designing programs, we need to be cognizant a lot of these people have a lot of debt. And if we give them assets, they're going to be forced to sell them to service this debt. So when we think about the programs, this is important to keep in mind. Okay, so cot, sort of my little tidbit on cot. So in rural Yemen, cot consumption is actually pretty high. And people are actually spending a lot of money on it, which is sort of surprising, I mean, given the prices. But one of the other side, the sort of side bit here, is that, yeah, people spend a lot on cot, but what I'm doing here is I'm comparing between cot consumption and health consumption. And those 4 bars show people that are, the ones on the left, so there's sort of a color change. The blue is people who are wealthy, and the sort of, I don't know if that's reddish, are people very poor. The sort of the takeaway point here is that people are spending a lot more on medical care than they are on cot. So we talk a lot about cot. People are wasting a lot of money on cot. It's making them poor. They're not bringing money home to feed their kids. But really, I mean, if we talk about things that are beggaring, sort of the costs that can push these people into poverty, healthcare is actually much more significant. And so thinking about ways, I mean, we should think about cot. I mean, this is too high. People in rural areas that earn $20,000 a month should not be spending 4,000 Yemeni Riyal a month on cot, but still healthcare is very, very high, and that seems like something that the international community could focus on and could potentially change. Well, I don't think we're going to have much of an effort on cot. Okay, so there's sort of a side point about inequality, because it's something that I think is pretty interesting, is that within village inequality is very, very high. It's much higher than the average. So Yemen, if you take that income Gini from, so I gave you the UN number. It's about 0.33. It puts it in the upper quartile. Our estimates using another kind of data set put it much higher. So it's a very, very unequal country. What's really interesting is there's a lot of inequality within villages, which means that there's lots of rich people within every village, more or less, which means there's people to work with. And there's people to engage with, and there's people that care about their community's members. These are the people, so I mean, yeah, inequality is high is sort of bad, but there's people that we can actually work with. There's people that are borrowing, helping poor people, and there's people for us to engage with. Okay, so resources, switching gears a little tiny bit. So we just heard a very nice presentation about the macro conditions of water, which I actually thought was really nice. But one of the other things about water that I don't think people talk as much about is the household implications of water and the water scarcity. We hear a lot about water is going to run out, but what are the implications for today? Right now, at least from this data source, it accounts for about 10% of total income during the dry season. So this is pretty significant. They're spending 10% of all their income on just water. This is just water for household consumption, just for drinking. What's really interesting about this, okay, so is that if you look, this chart I've put together gives you, reports source cost and transport cost for the water. So how much does it actually cost to buy the water, and how much does it cost to ship the water? Well, if you look, the source cost is really, really low. And so what it's saying is you go to the well, the water is really, really cheap, which on one hand doesn't reflect the scarcity because the markets aren't really functioning. But the second thing is it's saying the transport cost is about 80% of the cost of water during the dry season. The reason I'm focusing on this is, again, this is something that the international community can do. Transport costs are high because the roads don't function. Because, I mean, if you've been on a road in rural Yemen, I mean, you know how long it takes to go 3 kilometers. I mean, a 7-year-old kid can run faster than the car drives. And if we want to design programs that are going to improve quality of life, we can bring that transport cost down. I mean, playing around with the source cost with the water is much more complicated. I don't think we're very good at that, but maybe at the transport cost. We just heard a lot about private land. I won't talk too much about it. But the sort of my sort of piece here on land is that, so most land is cultivated, it's about 80%, and about 1/3 is terraced, at least within this sample. I mean, there's different estimates on how many what's the total acreage under terraces, but it's about 1/3. And yet, almost all of our development programs that are focused on agricultural improvements are focused on terraces. I mean, not entirely, but a lot, and I think totally disproportionately. So, and there's other things that are easier to solve. So rebuilding terraces that have deteriorated is very, very expensive and very difficult, as was pointed out. And yet we're still spending lots of money. When you interact with people, they're, well, we need to improve the terraces. It's very important. It's hereditary, et cetera. But there's new problems that they're facing that I think we can solve a lot easier. One example is about 5 to 10% of land is uncultivable because of a variety of different weed infestations. And there are some programs that are working to remove this. That's pretty low cost. And there's sort of different ways we can think about designing policies. Again, this is a little bit more about terraces. Only about 20% of terraces are abandoned. So again, this is I see terraces as sort of a small problem relative to other large-scale problems. Yeah, they create erosion and it damages water tables and a variety of other things like that. But maybe it's less significant than other kinds of problems. But again, I mean, if we want to focus programs on terraces, it's fine. But we should focus on the relative benefit. And if this thing on the bottom, I heard that this would be distributed at some point. This is the leading causes of terrace abandonment. Just so if people want to get a sense of this later. But the two most important reasons here are rainfall, which we can't control. So lack of rainfall, people give up on their terraces and they walk away. We can't control that, so we're not going to be able to improve terraces along that dimension. Migration, decline in population. This is mostly because you can't really make a living selling crops off a terrace. I mean, you just don't earn enough money, especially with all the importation of cheap goods. So, okay. I'm probably going way over time, but so women and gender equity. So this, again, goes back to these other kinds of development programs that I think there's a lot of good programs that are trying to reach out to women. I mean, the Dutch have been doing this for decades. And I think making a serious effort, with USAID has been doing this recently, I think, to good cause. But there's a couple difficulties we need to think about. The first is that women cannot travel to local markets, health centers, or take their children to a doctor if it's outside the village. I mean, just period. If it's within the village, they sometimes can do it if they have permission. But the mobility is very, very limited. What this is just showing is the bar on the right for each of these is whether the woman can go alone at all, ever, to these things. So about 50% of women say they cannot go alone to the market, no matter what. Even if they have their father's permission, I mean, they have to either go with an uncle, a brother, a father, a husband. I mean, more of them can go visit family and friends because those tend to be very, very close. But in most cases, they can't go alone. So we have to figure out a way to interact with these women. I don't know if it's doing house visits, other kind of very costly programs, which it sounds like the USAID program was a lot of house visits, very, very interactive, very high cost for the development actor. And we may have to face that cost if we really, really want to access these people. Okay, so then this is women's role in decision-making, which I think goes back to the fertility issues, is that women have really right now very limited role in decision-making. At least according to this, is that, I mean, some women say that they had a role to play in family planning. They could be part of a discussion. But 97% said that they have to get permission from their husband. And husbands are afraid of this. And again, it's going to be educating the husbands. And we talked about who do we want to engage with. I don't think we're going to, in the short term, be going to be able to change the culture of rural Yemen. So what we have to do is we have to go and figure out where we need to interact. So what this is suggesting is that women really don't have that much control over decision-making right now. And so the people that we need to engage with, and we definitely, I mean, we should engage with women, but we also need to bring the men into this discussion, talk to them about family planning, maybe doing it through the mosques, doing it through schools, doing it through other things, but convince them that family planning is good, that it's healthy, that it doesn't hurt them. I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions about contraceptives in Yemen. So last little bit here about sort of political and social structure, which goes back to the kinds of things that we do. So I'm going to contradict myself a little tiny bit. And I said before that these communities can really take care of themselves. I mean, I think that that's changing. So if you go and you talk to people and you ask them, are these sort of self-help organizations still there? Can the community take care of itself? A lot of people are starting to think that it won't. About 60% of the people said that mutual assistance customs are just totally disappearing. And what I'm showing here is where people go to get help. I think that, I mean, again, we don't know what it really looked like 50 years ago, but the sort of story was that 50 years ago, everyone would help each other out, especially the leader would play a very important role. Now, if you look, about 50% of people say that no one will help them. A little bit at odds with before, with people saying that they could borrow, but a lot of times they're borrowing from banks, they're borrowing from storekeepers, so they're not seeing that necessarily as really getting direct help. So, just to give a sense of, another dimension, the community plays a pretty important role in solving some kinds of problems. So the community seemed to be pretty good at solving things like schools, building schools and roads. There seems to be coordination on that. This is showing different kinds of, what I see them as different kinds of social community problems and who actually solves the problem. So something like public good, there's a lot of different people reporting, a variety of different people getting involved in it. Sometimes everyone in the village will get together. Some people say the sheikh will take care of it, but people take care of the problems. Political problems is sort of as expected or just relegated to the tribal sheikh, which I think is problematic because it's saying that the community, sort of the higher level, the community elders are not functioning as well as they did. But the one that's most telling, I think, is the damaged terraces. And that effectively, no one thinks that anyone will help them if their terraces are damaged. And again, why are we helping them if they don't want to improve these things? Okay, so my dissertation was on tribes, so I should add a little bit. But they continue to play a role in rural politics, and it's often sort of discussed in vague terms. One thing that what my dissertation focused on was that I showed that they can affect resource transfers from the central government, and that the size of the tribe actually affects how much resources they can extract from the government. You can also show that tribal connections certainly affect availability of government resources. Who knows what this will look like in a year? I mean, everything could change. It's more likely to be very the same, but who knows? Okay, so here are those questions again. I already went through them. I'm not sure if I answered them all, but since I've sort of been, so what can the international community do? What are the kinds of programs that we can actually effectively implement? I mean, again, maybe this is just my background and my training, but I really think that when we think about rural development, which again is the vast majority of the program, we really need to focus on job creation and not welfare only. And I think of animal transfers as welfare. I mean, cash for work programs, they're welfare programs. Food programs are welfare programs. We need to do things that create jobs. I mean, there's other people in the Gulf that are doing this. The Saudis are building industrial cities. So are the people in Qatar, other places. I mean, we could support things along those lines. We could concentrate provincial and district centers because we know people are going there to do work, and we can work with those areas to try to build some capacity. Get rural markets to work. I mean, something very simple that we could do, which we're not actively doing, is just build roads. There's a lot of problems with trying to implement that, but it's something we successfully have done before, we being sort of the U.S. community and international community. And the other thing is that, especially from the U.S. perspective, is that I don't think our policymakers do a very good job supporting Yemeni programs. I mean, they do on a limited basis, and they work with one group at a time, but we have this sort of, we don't like working with Yemeni organizations. And one great organization, the Social Fund for Development, again, this is the one I worked with, so I'm biased. But here's probably, hands down, the most effective development actor in Yemen. They're the only one that can actually run programs everywhere in the country. And they have the British think they're the best actor. We won't give them anything because we control every program. We don't want to defer to them when it comes to designing programs. We want to tell them what to do. And so there's great programs like the Empowerment for Local Development program, which is it's a decentralization program followed with a women's empowerment and a democracy program reaching out to rural areas. I mean, it encompasses a lot of the different kind of programs we're discussing here. We won't even go near it, we, again, being sort of the U.S. So, I mean, I think that we can do a better job engaging, and maybe this is going and cherry-picking successful programs, but I think it's something we need to start thinking about, even if they're governmental programs. Okay, thanks.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Ambassador. You've given us both two excellent and comprehensive presentations with a lot of good questions, and both of you, in fine Washington tradition, actually gave us suggestions as where we go forward in the policy context, which is what we always hope will come out of presentations that are also substantive in terms of their research and understanding the conditions, but the kind of going forward with the so what and what should we do with it, as well as raising some counterintuitive or points that challenge some of our assumptions and how we do business. So I want to throw the floor open for discussion. Like before, I'd like you to use a microphone so our folks online can hear your questions and enjoy those insights as well. So who would like to kick us off in starting the discussion? Ramona down here in the front.
Again, Aisha Jaman from CDC. I have two questions, one for the ambassador and then another one for Daniel. You showed in one of your slides how much land is being used for agriculture. It went from about 40 to 400,000 hectares or something like that. I'd like to know how much of it is being used for qat, what percent of that, of the new land that's being used, how much of it is cultivated for qat, and also how much of the water that's being used also is used for qat as well. And for Daniel, I would like to know where your study was done. In Yemen, I was very surprised to see fish as one of the highest consumed proteins, so that would like to know that. And also, it was very interesting because it almost seems to say that people are able to find food, yet I know that malnutrition in Yemen from the 70s until now had actually worsened. So you did show expenditure on qat and then compare that to health. I would have liked to see that on also expenditure for food.
Okay. Ambassador, so we can go a couple ways. We can anticipate a number of questions. So why don't we capture a couple if we all are diligent in getting these good questions down, but we'll gather a few then and give a chance to respond. Gentleman over here.
Yes, hi. Those were wonderful presentations. I have a question for the ambassador, and that's the role of fossil water. Two questions really. I understand that in the Hadramaut, the fossil water is saline. In other words, it's got high mineral content that's not directly usable. And second, the extent to which fossil water is being used in Tawila Basin, in Sana'a itself. I've heard different things about this. You know, how much of that is renewable and how much of that is fossil water. Then for Daniel, I had the same question. Where did you do it? Because one of the things that the ambassador pointed out is that we've got to be very careful about the regional differences of Yemen. I think you know, there are quite different circumstances in Yemen, and we should be specific when we're talking about a particular area. But the second thing is, it's rain-fed, so not caught. And then why then are the rural wages so high? That was interesting. Thank you.
Okay. Roger Mark, we'll take that one, and then we'll give our panelists a chance to respond.
I'll just echo, I think, two very interesting and fascinating presentations. Just a quick question for both of you in terms of looking at rural versus urban development. And you know, when you think of donors who can provide support and have limited resources and are thinking of what's the best return on that investment, very often questions around looking at urban development or whether how much can be invested in urban settings where there are opportunities for economies of scale, and which is much more beneficial in an urban setting versus investing in rural settings where you're able to reach traditionally underserved populations. And I wonder whether you had any thoughts about those sort of questions, sort of urban versus rural investment and what it would mean for Yemen. Thank you.
Okay, that gives us a good panoply of questions. Ambassador, would you like to take the first crack?
Thank you. Mrs. Juman, the question about the land for irrigation, how much for cat and how much water, it's very difficult to answer that, but I can say that most of the growth in the irrigated area has been for cat. And by most, I would say 70% of the growth is for cat. And of course, water follows from that. For the gentleman regarding the fossil groundwater, I don't know where you got that information from, but regarding the salinity of groundwater. But what I'm talking about here is a huge aquifer extending from the Hadramaut into the Shabwa area, and with huge reserves estimated by some at a 60,000 square kilometer area with few hundred meters thickness. We're talking about 2 trillion cubic meters of water. I don't think, well, lately we have drilled some wells for the Mukalla city to relieve the pressure from the Ghail Bawazir has been, that area, it's like an oasis, and most of the water has been taken for the city of Mukalla. All the palm trees and the farming there really suffered from that. And to alleviate that, to relieve that pressure, we drilled wells into that same aquifer. And the water is good. Maybe in some areas it is saline, but I think this matter in general is worth further exploring, because even if there is salinity in some areas, it will not be all over. That's as for At-Tawila. Of course, the term of fossil water is a very elusive kind of term. What would you consider fossil? If you have, say, even 1% rainfall recharge into that aquifer, would you still consider it fossil water, or it has to be sealed completely from recharge, and so on and so forth? I don't consider the Tawila aquifer in Sana'a Basin as a fossil aquifer, because it still receives some recharge, and it is depleted at rates higher than the extraction rates. It's being mined, but the water, of course, in 1 year, this is the rough number for Sana'a Basin. In 1 year, we pump out 5 years of recharge. So it's like having a bank account, where your income is 10,000 and you're spending 50,000. So you go bankrupt sooner or later. This is what's happening there in Sana'a Basin. And it has been happening for maybe 30 years now. So if we are, probably now we are pumping water that was there maybe 150 years ago or so. The rural versus urban, Mr. Mark, regarding return on investment, rural versus urban, versus urban. I would go with the rural, personally. I think one reason for that is that there is good potential in rural areas for scaling up and for replication, and for people really to see, people they have to see to believe. And if you have success stories in the rural areas, then you can rest assured that that people will embrace these, and they will help themselves. The rural community of Yemen has long tradition of cooperation, of working together. It has maybe decreased, but it's not maybe like the old times. But there is a tradition there that can be revived, that can help a lot in overcoming many of these its problems. Thank you.
Are these all turned on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, the question about sampling is, I should have said from the beginning. A lot of the samples, so the sample that focused on food is mostly from the West and includes a lot of parts from the Tihama, lots of Al-Hudaydah, so there's lots of fish consumption. I mean, but fish consumption is a little bit more widespread than you might think. I mean, there's a lot of people in weird places and times that'll eat fish at all costs. So you do see, but that's right. I mean, the sample's mostly from the West. Some of the other sample it's a little bit farther east, but it's mostly Hajjah, Amran, Sana'a, Mahwi, Ibn Damar is most of the sample. So it's not representative of the whole country, which is a fair point. The question about worsening nutrition, I mean, again, from a caloric point of view, I don't know if that's true. I mean, I think from a nutritional point of view, that is true, and those are different things. If we look at expenditures, people are not spending very much money on nutritional foods. It's really not even available in the stores. If you go to a little Bikala, anywhere in a rural village, they sell cookies, they sell cigarettes, they sell juicy drinks, and that's about it. I mean, really, you're not getting, there's not high nutrition things there. And they're not bringing meats in either. I mean, to a very small extent. But that traditionally, the nutritional consumption was totally from local production. And I think that has not increased to keep up with population. So probably that there's less access to those sorts of things, the sort of root vegetables that they're using for getting access to nutrition. So I think, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, this is not, I'm not a specialist specifically in this issue, but my impression is that the caloric issues that people are facing from that point of view, that nutritional point of view, has not worsened. But I think access to micronutrients has worsened. And the question about can we justify development in rural Yemen? I mean, are there from a return on investment point of view? I mean, I think it's a very difficult issue. Certainly, there's a lot of potential in terms of sort of access to labor. And there's, I mean, these places tend to be pretty capital poor. I mean, so you can pour a lot of money into an urban area, but there's a lot of capital there, and you're sort of competing against everyone else. I don't think that there's that many, as someone else suggested, I don't think that there's that many development actors that are really making an effort to focus on working in different areas. I mean, maybe we could build sort of new urban areas in some of these rural areas. There's some provincial towns, some provincial, they're governorates, but I get distracted working too many places. The governorate capitals, I think, could benefit a lot. Like the city of Al-Eryani, I think, could benefit from a lot of investment. And some of these other cities, I mean, if we want to do large-scale capital investment, it may be better there than the other places where we work, where there's already a lot of private money from within the country going there. I mean, anyone with any money in Yemen brings their money to Sana'a because it's safe, it's not risky. We, as sort of the international development community, can face a little bit of that risk. We can take high-risk, high-return investments, and I think we can do that in some of these some of the governorate capitals. The question about wages, I mean, I think wages in Yemen are just way too high, and in some sense, I mean, you compare it to other comparable countries with similar economies. I mean, the day wage rate in Yemen, as far as I know, is between $5 and $10 for an unskilled laborer. You go to a place like Afghanistan, which people often compare Yemen to, it's about $2. There's a big gap there. That's true of urban areas, and it trickles over to rural areas because people migrate. I mean, because a lot of people will live in a rural area, and then they'll migrate for the whole week or for the day to an urban area to work. And so that's what the wages get bid up to. I mean, I think it's largely the oil. But again, it's not something I don't think that people have spent much time studying. There hasn't been much of a focus on labor dynamics.
Okay. Another round of questions. Start right here.
Abdurrahman Al-Eryani from the Yemen Embassy here in DC. My question is for Dr. Mohammed. It is now formal. I mean, the government has said that we have a water crisis in Sana'a. And so we've been told by different organizations that it is forecasted that by 2017, Sana'a would run out of water. Now, what do you feel regarding what can we do to support the demand of water to Sana'a? There were reports that maybe we could pump water from another city, from another governor, from the Mar. I just want to know how is this feasible, and thank you.
Okay, calling on your engineering expertise. Yes, gentleman in the back.
It's Jim Franskevich from USAID. I'm curious as to whether people have looked at Sana'a Basin as far as reaching a point in time when the only water supply you have there is going to be a drinking water supply, and if you're going to reach some kind of a equilibrium then of everything stops except for water coming out of the groundwater supply for drinking.
Okay. I have a third question to add to the mix. Or why don't we just go with the two of those, and maybe Ambassador, you could again start.
Well, the first question regarding 2017, I don't like this this approach to when people start putting years, when will the water end? This is really, in a way, it's a good way to alarm, and to raise concern and to mobilize action. But in practice, as the last question here, what will happen is that more and more water will move out of the irrigation market into the domestic use. This is what will happen. Water will become more expensive, and as it becomes more scarce or deeper, or it will become more expensive, and farmers would then start selling it to domestic users. It will be trucked to houses, whatever, in whatever way that it will happen. But I think there will, at the end, the equilibrium point is the 50 million cubic meter of recharge, which is the annual recharge about 50 million cubic meter, and the consumption is about 250 million. So that's what I meant by 1 to 5. And every year we spend, so the 50 million, if you take it as the the number for that, then and you try to figure out how many people can that serve, as at the rate that we're talking about, here, maybe 70 liters per day, maybe with 30% loss, or 40 or whatever. Maybe we're looking at about I don't know what the number would be, but you can figure it out. How many people would that basin be able to sustain for domestic use out of a 50 million cubic meter? I think this is a theoretical calculation anyway, because things really, the dynamics of the market and the climate change factors and the changes in the water use and the impact of water becoming more costly on the people living in the urban area. Some of them will start moving their families out of Sana'a, sending them back to the village because water is more expensive. That's why I say it becomes a theoretical calculation, because many factors can interfere to change the equation. I hope that gave you a little bit of an answer to both questions.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that?
Yeah, please.
Is it possible to have a functional market for water? I mean, actually price water that farmers are using so that you can actually sell it?
Practically, I don't think so. The Jordanians, I think they have tried to do that. I don't know how much success they've had. I don't think they had success anyway, and they have more controlled environment there in terms of drilling wells, in terms of licensing the wells, and also in terms of how many wells they have. I think in Yemen we are talking about more than 100,000 well. In Jordan we're talking maybe about 5, 6 to 10,000 well, and all of them were drilled with licenses. Probably, not all, but maybe 95% of them. And despite all of that, they cannot really, the farmer lobbying is a lot stronger than, and also, as I said, it's a failure of economic diversification that has really led to the soft policies on this issue. So in short, I think it is not a feasible thing that one should pursue.
Okay, I have a question here.
Yeah, I just had a quick follow-up question to the ambassador. I was at a presentation about Yemen not too long ago, and you mentioned the aquifer, and of course it's all in the south. And this is a big political issue right now, that the Southerners are throwing this up. They say, the oil was in the south, and the Masila block in the south, and now the water's all in the south. And what do the Southerners get from this? It becomes very hot. I mean, it seems to me the political difficulties are going to complicate a water, if that is actually the case, that there is a huge basin of water that can be used, whether this can be resolved politically.
I'd like to throw an additional question in, which is to ask you about trade, and in the sense of maybe about the cot, how much of that is being exported in versus domestic consumption, and if there are any levers that would offer. And then, of course, the way that water-scarce countries in the world deal with water scarcity is to import food in the form of virtual water. So is this, what's the scale of that now? What are the prospects for that making up shortcomings in some of the areas that you've talked about?
This is to me.
Sure.
Okay. The first question regarding the South. There is a problem also of water in this, all over the country. Problem of water is all over the country. So any solution is needed all over the country. But there is also fossil groundwater in the north, in Ramlat Sabatain, which is also, this was one of the ideas of transporting water to Sana'a, because the altitude difference is only 900 meters. But in general, pumping water over high altitudes is really very costly thing. It is, it takes about 1 kilowatt hour to raise 1 cubic meter, 300 meters altitude. So if you're pumping water from, from the sea, for example, sea level to Sana'a, which is 2,200 meters, you're looking at 7 kilowatt hours plus just to lift that water, 1 cubic meter up. But then the more serious problem with pumping water from, to the higher is the vandalism that will be along the way. People will really tap into these pipelines, and by the end you'll have nothing there at the tap. This is very difficult to control. So it's easier to move people to where water is. This is something that people should think about and really seriously consider. And if we're talking about mega projects, why don't we look at coastal development of urban coastal centers that can really absorb this and where desalination becomes feasible, in terms of cost and affordability to people also.
One thing on that. That was also a hot political issue. The Southerners didn't like the North coming to the South.
No. I mean, desalination in Hudaydah, desalination in Aden, desalination in Mukalla, north-south. Let's not talk about north-south now. Let's not. Yeah, we were talking about water, and water flows everywhere. Okay, it doesn't just flow from the south to the north or north to south. And actually, I still remember a very nice joke back in 78. Was it 78? When there was friction along the border. And there was a commentary in the TV here in the US. I was doing my master's here, and this commentary came with very famous commentator. He said, what the hell are we doing in Yemen? At that time, there was F-4s and 5s sent to Yemen, purchased, I think, by the Saudis for the Yemenis. And then this commentator came and said, what the hell are we doing in Yemen? We're used to supporting the north, against the south, But this is east and west. It's not north-south anyway. It was North Vietnam, South Vietnam, North Korea, South Korea. He was referring to that. So it is not north-south, it's east-west, considering the land blocks, not the capitals. But anyway, this is one issue. The other is about cat trade. I think cat is a commodity like every other commodity. And if you look in this strategy, water strategy, we have proposed that cat importation should be really allowed. And that the communities that live on cat production, they can go and invest in neighboring countries to grow cat, and they will be given the licenses to export it to Yemen, and they can still, and the whole economic cycle in terms of in terms of transport and retailing, and can still be preserved. And this is not really a far-fetched thinking, because already we have cat farmers from Djibouti growing cat in Kenya and bringing it to Djibouti. We have Saudis growing, I think, bananas, I don't know where, and bringing it to Saudi Arabia, and so on and so forth. These companies and investors, entrepreneurs who really go and grow whatever the market they see needed for the market, and they invest in that in water-rich countries, and so it is this option should really have more exploration. Cat export also, we should not forget that there is lots of hard currency earned by exporting cat to Saudi Arabia. Cat is sold in Saudi Arabia. We know that, and the story is, you fill a car, a brand new Toyota 4-wheel drive with cat. If you can deliver it across the border, the car is yours. If you can find your way without being caught there. But this is true. It's not at least this is what we hear, So there is good trade going, and there is hard currency coming out of cat. But I believe if you calculate the amount of hard currency we lose because of cat, and the opportunity, in terms of drilling wells, the technologies, the expenditure in equipment, the expenditure on diesel fuel, subsidized diesel fuel, and pumping the water, the cost of the water to get it, to replace that water, the pesticides expenditure, the health impact, with lots of if you calculate how much hard currency is lost because of cat growing in Yemen, it will not be, I don't think it will be far from the hard currency needed to buy cat from abroad at the national level.
Does that? I mean, that's an interesting point. I don't know if that's politically feasible, the actual importation. I know a lot of people joke around about going and starting cod farms in China, so they can start importing cod from China as well. Since they already get the jambias and they get all the toys and everything else, they might as well import cod. But the cod export, there's a lot of hard currency, but it's a nasty business. It's mostly 12-year-old kids. Once in a while there is an SUV, but my at least what I've seen is it's mostly kids, and it's kids leading donkeys across the border, and it's a really high cost. That's the other high cost of that trade, is that it's impacting a lot of children. It's taking away opportunities. It's teaching. There's kids that grow up. If you want to be an entrepreneur in the north, you get involved in cod smuggling. There's 12, 14-year-old kids that have become wealthy off of it, but that has another human cost aspect too. So it's as long as cod remains illegal in a lot of countries, it's going to be difficult. So there's no export to Germany at all?
Not official.
Not official.
I'll let the ambassador off the hook with it. We have a question, final question before we break for lunch.
It's official, by the way, in the Netherlands. It's allowed. It's allowed in the UK.
There's a lot allowed in the Netherlands, right? Yeah. Okay, we'll get a question here and then one in the back, right?
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I'm still Fatima from the Embassy of Yemen, and just on the cod business, and this is very interesting. The idea here is, I think we're forgetting about the labor in Yemen, and it's in Yemen Poverty Strategy Reduction, the PRSP, which was developed in 2003. One of the main hurdles that were faced in terms of regulating the water and the cod market was the fact that you cannot, what would you do with this huge amount of people who are working on the labor farms? And in a sense, while it's a great idea to just get the cod from any other country, you would still have a huge labor problem that you need to tackle. So that's just, I just wanted to add that to the discussion. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about is we get asked a lot by Congress, you know, what are you doing about water? I mean, this is the number one question. You know, you have a water problem. What are you doing about it? You've mentioned the strategy that was developed. I'm wondering how successful it was. Is it a long-term strategy that could still be endorsed by other donors? And then the last thing you mentioned, I think we need to expect that there will be some kind of demographic changes. There will be some movement to other areas where water is not as scarce. Have we started working with the international community in terms of identifying, you know, these areas and starting some kind of a reallocation of the population? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll just get the last question in the back.
This is Song Cho-jung from the Millennium Project, and I just wanted to hear what you think on privatization on water and sanitation, because I know there has been some push by IMF, British government, etc., on like Yemen and African countries. So, yeah, thank you.
The sanitation health issues. Okay, if we could do those two interventions very quickly, and then we'll have a chance to break for lunch.
Well, thank you, Fatima. The labor, if you remember in my presentation what I said about CAT, that it cannot be handled just, you know, by one-time decision. You know, it has to be taken step by step, and as you implement the various measures and you start absorbing this labor force into other economic activities, as you do that, you know, the CAT issue and the solutions for the CAT issue will become more and more feasible. Otherwise, you're absolutely right. I mean, CAT is really a big employer of the economy. It's probably the biggest employer. You cannot really just shut that off and think that you're doing any good. I think it's not possible. It has to be tackled step by step, piecemeal, and along with other measures to deal with the water issue. The water strategy, as I said, it was a tool for aligning and harmonizing the government and the donors behind a vision that has been embraced by the government with input from the donors. It has been very successful if you look at the impact in terms of number of people served, you know, in terms of water supply and sanitation. Dramatic changes have happened. Every year, I think it was 400,000 people getting water supplies, something like, you know, in that neighborhood. And, you know, in terms of regulation of the groundwater, in terms of irrigation improvement, whatever, you know, in all the 5 sectors. So there has been a good impact. As I said, it is regularly appraised, you know, there is or reviewed. There is a joint annual review every year that the government and the donors, they carry out that review, and they modify and change and agree on steps to move forward. So it has been really a roadmap for the sector. It has been, a success story, for the sector. So if anybody asks you where can they put their money, there is a strategy there. There is already estimates for how much it will cost to do X, Y, Z in that in that sector. The democratic change and new areas. This is, you know, moving people to new areas is a very sensitive political issue. You know, there are lots of interests in wherever you are living now in Sana'a. You know, land prices and all of this and houses and investment in real estate, and then all of a sudden you start saying, okay, we're moving government offices out of this place to another place where there is more water, and then what will happen to these investments that have been, so there is resistance, there is, democracy can probably help rationalize decisions in those directions, hopefully. But we don't know when will we reach that point in time where maybe by the time we reach that point, our democracy matures enough to make these kinds of decisions. We'll be out of water anyway. I think maybe maybe it can be too late. But then the lady from the Millennium Project about the privatization, there has been a very successful reform program in the urban and rural water supply and sanitation sector or sectors. The main elements is decentralization and and community engagement and tariff restructuring and so on and so forth. But for the private sector, a lot of private entrepreneurs, they are investing in water. I think city of Sana'a, for example, only less than 50% of the people are served by the public utility, and the rest are served by private networks. Smaller networks, they serve maybe 100 households or 200 households. They have their own well and they have their pipes and they serve that community, neighborhood. And the rest, they are served by water, hauling by trucks, which is also a kind of it's a private investment. In the rural areas, it's the same thing. So there is already very good engagement for the private sector in domestic and also even in irrigation. There are also entrepreneurs for irrigation. They drill wells and they supply farmers with water for part of the crop or by the hour, and so on and so forth. It is already an active economic process there. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Daniel?
I think he...
Okay, terrific. Well, we've had, I think, an excellent morning with a start with our first panel that laid out the demographic and population reproductive health. That presentation on child marriage was a foundation that we then built on with this discussion of natural resources, emphasis on water. But I think Daniel's framing that in the context of economic development with a very specific set of points about what that means for donors in terms of understanding some of those differences at a finer grain level were tremendously helpful. So thank you all for the very good questions and the excellent panelists. As I mentioned when we start, what we're going to do now is going to go one floor down, right where we are, grab a sandwich and go into the 5th floor conference room, and we will have the good fortune of hearing from former Ambassador Hall, ambassador from the U.S. to Yemen, who will put some of these issues and focus on the governance and institutions question. And then we'll have a final panel this afternoon. But please, before we do that, join me in thanking our two panelists for an excellent discussion this morning.